Welcome to episode 66, Launching Your Product with Digital Marketing.
Welcome to the PR Playbook Podcast, the only podcast giving you actionable skills and advice you need to execute a strategic PR program. Warning: what you hear next may lead to brand awareness and increased sales and customer exposure. Now here's your host, Ranjini Joshua.
Hello and welcome today to episode 66. I'm speaking with a beloved partner of the Silver Telegram and the CEO of Russe Marketing, Will Russell. Thanks for joining me today on today's PR Playbook podcast.
Thank you, Ranjini. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to interview you because I think, we've been working together for quite a few years now, and we've done several campaigns that are really focused on the launch of a new product. And I think it's important to know that PR alone, of course, does not make a successful launch. So you have a lot of different elements to it. Digital marketing is a huge component, especially when we're talking about crowdfunding. Will and I have done several crowdfunding campaigns and then regular projects too. And I think, digital marketing is kind of an essential part of crowdfunding, but also a really good partner to PR when it comes to launching any kind of product. So if you're actively engaging a PR agency, you probably want to fire on all cylinders. You definitely want to hire a digital marketing agency as well, or make sure they have digital marketing capabilities. And then the same reverse. So today we're going to ask Will some really key questions when it comes to launching a new product. Are you ready?
Great. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, well, first, before we get started into the questions, why don't you give a little quick background on yourself and Russe Marketing?
Sure. Well, as you said, Ranjini, Russe Marketing, we are a launch marketing agency, and at the core, we have a five-step system that we implement on behalf of our clients. And so we're using channels like advertising, email marketing, referral marketing, landing page design. What we're trying to do is validate number one and successfully launch these products or these events or these ideas. The nature of the space we're in does mean, as you point out, we do a lot of crowdfunding, but I think that the launch system and launches in general extend well beyond just the Indiegogo and Kickstarter space, and there's a lot of folks now who are launching their own pre-orders. There's a lot of different kind of Shopify-esque platforms and plugins that allow you to run these campaigns yourself. And so we're doing more and more of the non-crowdfunding stuff and trying to replicate this launch system in all sorts of different ways.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that go into a launch. Obviously, we're not the only two players. There's a lot of other stuff, product packaging, things like that. And I think it goes to be said too. If you don't have a great product or you haven't really put in all your effort into the art, the design, the photos, I mean, the images, the assets that you have to build around those kinds of things, we also can't do our job properly. And I think that's also important. So every piece of the puzzle is great, but us two together, I think, also very much complement each other along with social media marketing as well. So when you're specializing in launch marketing, which I love, and I think what makes this different from regular digital marketing when you're launching, I think is important to know. So what is different from, like, let's say, like, you're just managing a day-to-day project versus launching a product? What are the key elements that go into like a launch?
Yeah, I would say there are a few different things that make launch marketing different from traditional digital marketing. Firstly, is how much time you have. So when we're working on clients who have a 12-month calendar to run campaigns, there's there's a lot more opportunity to learn and fail, frankly, and learn from those failures and change things and improve things and go slow and steady. When you're launching something, as you know, Ranjini, the client often wants it tomorrow, launched as soon as possible, and there's no time for mistakes. There's no time for room for errors. So it
Yeah.
really condenses your plans and your strategies into a really, really short time frame, and you have to learn really, really quickly. And within that, I would say that when you're looking at these longer term strategies, you see a lot of you'll see a lot of information out there and read a lot of information on testing and optimization, and that's important. Don't get me wrong, but when you're launching, you don't have the time to be slowly testing. You have to test things that and try things that will create massive impact rather than just increments. And so I think one of the things that we have to focus on in our launch marketing strategies is, not what's going to improve something by a small percentage point, or not how is copy A going to be a little bit better in how it performs versus copy B, but what's going to fundamentally change the trajectory of this launch. What are the changes we can make, or the learnings we can get, which is going to take this from a six-figure campaign to a seven-figure campaign, or is going to double the conversion rate. Really, really big changes. And so along those lines, I think one of the differences you'll see in working with an agency that specializes in launches versus one that doesn't is how predictive they can be in what these uh, impactful areas are. They will, having done lots of campaigns, they know what to look out for, what's going to change the game, and folks who approach things in a longer time scale, a campaign of a 12 months or 18 months, just don't have that uh, experience to focus on these really impactful areas. So for people like you and I, we know what changes the game when we have 4 weeks to do it.
Right.
Uh, and that's really important to understand coming into a launch.
So, I mean, that you bring up a really interesting point that I think I'd like to touch on, which is the sense of urgency. And, like you said, when you have a 12 to 18 months, you don't have like a lot of sense of urgency. You have time to test, you can test things out. And that usually happens like maybe after a launch of like a formal launch. But if someone's not doing a crowdfunding campaign or a Kickstarter campaign or even a pre order campaign, if they're just launching, what are some things that you think, like maybe you guys have done on the digital marketing side that can kind of create that sense of urgency? Because that's often what some of our clients have trouble with is like, oh, well, we want to do Kickstarter because it's a 30-day window or a 60-day window, and that will generate a lot of sales in those 30 to 60 days that can kind of help us, gain that momentum. Without those parameters, how can you create a sense of urgency with your campaign?
I think if you launch your own thing on your own website without crowdfunding or any of these pre-order pieces, uh, then creating the urgency just comes from building out offers that people have to take advantage of in a timely way. So on
Right.
crowdfunding, you have these time periods, yes, but if you're launching your own product, I think the first thing you would consider is what kind of launch trajectory do you want? Because there is this urgency component to launches because people want like a big day one. They want the success and the balloons and the et cetera, et cetera. And in order to get there, you need massive urgency.
Hmm.
And I consider that like when you're talking about the tortoise and the hare, that story. Because the hare, you go really, really quickly. But there is another approach, especially for people who are doing their own launch, which is the tortoise. And you can take it a little bit more slowly. You still have less time, but the incentivization of making people act quickly has a little less of a priority. So I want to make sure people are conscious that if they don't want this big day one and they don't want to plow a lot of effort and energy into this big bonanza of a launch, that's okay because there are other ways to set about your launch trajectory. But I would say, I mean, simply having a limited quantities, having additional bonuses for people that act quickly, having time frames whereby offers are only available during certain time frames,
Mm.
sure that you're tapping into uh, and resolving a lot of the questions or objections that would come up in advance. If you want to have a big, urgent launch, then you can't have people arriving on launch day and asking questions about this, that, and the other. Those questions need to have been answered and resolved before you launch.
Right.
If you're under no urgency, that doesn't really matter. You can answer those questions as you go.
That's
So
true.
making sure that everything is done in advance of launch to number one, resolve any possible lingering questions, and
Right.
number two, just give people a reason to act now rather than wait a week or wait a month, and that can be discounts or additional offers or bonuses, referral opportunities, any bits and pieces like that can work well.
Yeah, I think that's good. Like preparation, no matter what you're doing, a regular traditional launch, crowdfunding launch. I think preparation is so key. Just to kind of think of all the, maybe different little nuggets and areas that you can add value at or answer questions. I know, in campaigns that we've done together, it's like these little pieces of content where people are asking questions, but we don't have the answer to fill those things. So asking yourself all the questions possible in advance so that you could create that content and, like you said, kind of give them what they need as you go.
Right, and asking the audience, right, as well as yourself. I think so, something people tend to think about, and I'm sure you see this, right? How many potential launch clients do you speak to who think they're going to be raising $1 million? You
Yeah,
know, it's a decent percentage
everyone.
for everyone, and this is their idea, this is their product. So obviously they've got to have belief in it, and then you want them to have belief in it and faith in it. But their perception doesn't match the market. You know, what they think and their friends think and what their mum thinks isn't necessarily what the market's going to think. So,
Hmm.
as well as making sure they're asking these questions to themselves and what is it, thinking what is it that these prospective customers will ask me, think of really easy and simple strategy is to ask them and use some of this pre-launch stage period to put this out there, put the product out there, and start hearing some of the questions that come back, and that gives you plenty of time, as you mentioned, to prepare and build out all these answers, so that when you turn that dial up from 1 to 100 at that launch,
Yeah.
you're not flapping around trying to compile this information. It's already ready to go, and you can just knock it out and get these answers published quickly.
Yeah, I think that's maybe one of the mistakes that some startups make when they're launching new products, especially when it comes to these kind of Kickstarter campaigns, but even when it comes to their own launches, is that they don't realize that it should also be kind of a form of testing the market. Yeah, okay, you have a product, you have some value propositions, that's fantastic. You have a kind of what your target demo is, but there's still so much you can learn in this process. And I think if you're nimble, and that's the difference between a launch agency. I think you're nimble and you can like shift quickly. And so I think also the client, the brand also has to be nimble and be able to kind of adjust, right, as we go.
Yeah, I mean, nimble is an important point. For example, as you might have seen, there's a lot of enterprise companies, kind of global corporations getting involved in this launch space. As
Mhm.
JBL have launched a number of campaigns, Canon have launched campaigns, because it's a great way to validate an idea. That's exactly what it is. It's a great way of getting an idea out there and seeing how the market responds. However, the thing about these bigger companies is the lack of nimbleness they have, and that makes it really challenging. It's almost like there's two competing forces when we're working on these enterprise campaigns. The whole purpose of a lot of these strategies around a launch is to be able to make these decisions on the fly and be
Mhm.
able to change pretty quickly and pivot very quickly. And bigger companies just are unable to do that. You know, the decision making processes, the number of people that need to be involved in decisions, the back and forth that everything requires, the legal components of everything, makes it very, very, very challenging. So again, I think there's a difference between just regular marketing and launch marketing. If you're in an ecosystem or in a company where decisions take a long time to be made, maybe launch marketing isn't for you, because it's going to be a struggle to adapt quickly enough to take advantage of the opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like I can go on this this topic. So I'm going to go to the next question. If you're wanting to launch a digital marketing strategy, you're getting ready for an upcoming launch, what is a good place to start? Let's say you have nothing. Okay, let's just pretend I'm a brand new company and you have nothing. What is the good place to start for digital marketing specifically?
I think before you push too hard or go too deep in your digital marketing, and I mean any marketing, I would say, is this validation component that we touched on. We'll have people come to us and have spent a lot of money on product development, for example,
Mhm.
and preparing their first manufacturing run. and working with designers and etc., without actually understanding whether this product at this price point in this manner of presentation is what people want.
Yeah.
And so, before doing anything, we would suggest validate your idea. And as I said, don't validate it with your close friends. Don't validate it with
Your
uh,
mom.
your family, your mum. Validate it with strangers because there's no one who's going to be more cruel than strangers on the internet, and that's true. And so, get this idea out there. You can have some very basic photos, renders, even a couple of mock-up designs, just to give people an idea of what is this going to be when it's
Mhm.
ready, and get it out there. Run some small ad campaigns, drive some traffic to the landing page, and just see, do people even care? And if they do, and you're able to understand, well, this audience works well, or this message works well, then you can move forward and start investing more money and time into the idea. But for anyone we speak to, the biggest recommendation is validate this as an idea that will work before going any further, and save yourself potentially a lot of heartache and money.
And I love, you kind of introduced this idea to me because I'm not a digital marketer. I mean, I am in a different way, but I think I'm not a digital marketer. I don't work with Facebook ads on a daily basis. I do them when I have to. It's kind of like that. And I love this validation because it actually, for us, it actually gives so much value to the client because it could tell you if you need to move forward or not. Like I think that's the thing. Or if you need to make adjustments so that when you do launch, you'll have a higher grade of success. And so I think that validation part is such a good investment because you're not just paying for a validation, you're also getting data. You provide so much data around the validation. And I think it's such a just like it's a little bit of time that you're kind of investing also with the money, but I think it's so worth it because you kind of have a very clear scope at the end of that validation. Like, okay, the product launch is probably going to go something like this,
Yeah,
right? You have just a better vision of what's going to happen in the future.
yeah, and it's a reality check as well
Yeah.
for a lot of
Yeah.
people. Both ways, though. Yeah, I think the fear entrepreneurs have when we approach them with these validation ideas is, well, what if it doesn't work? I've spent a year of my life planning for this already. What if it doesn't work? And that's,
It's scary. Yeah.
but on the flip side, we've had projects where we've been able to come back to the client at the end of validation and say, you can raise your prices here. The market's going to respond at a much higher price point. And
Yeah.
when
Nice.
they launch, they've raised their prices and they've ended up bringing more revenue than they would have done otherwise. So it can work both ways. It's not just is this going to fail, but it's how can you position this offer in the most meaningful and successful way before you start investing a whole bunch of time and money in it.
Yeah, no, I love it. I absolutely love it. I want to offer it to as many people as I can that I think will consider it. I think everyone should consider it, but there's people who are, like you said, the new product or product launches their baby and they're just going to go forward no matter what. So the best thing we could do is just gather the data that will help support that if they're not willing to do the validation. Do
Right.
you do you still think what are your feelings about email? I feel like email is still very king in the world, but how do you navigate when it's so noisy right now? Do you think email still has that same precious value?
Yeah, I do. But I also think that it's irresponsible to rely solely on email. When you and I first met and started working together a few years ago, it was all about building an email list. And you
Yeah,
build an email list and you launch and everything's great. And it's just so different now. I think building an email list is still a really high priority during that pre-launch phase, getting people excited, getting people into a community. But that can't be the only touch point you have, and that can't put all your eggs in that basket. So in the
right.
same way that when we work on campaigns, we recommend, hey, add PR, add other bits and pieces to this strategy.
Right.
It's the same with email. Rather than just looking at email, it's like, well, how about SMS? How about starting Facebook groups? How about chatbot marketing? How can you create all these different touch points with a prospect so that if their inbox is overcrowded, which it often is these days, they're not going to miss the message because
Well,
there's all these other ways they can connect with you.
okay, you talked about text message, so I just want to touch on that because I think that's really tricky, right? Like Can you tell me more about how you think people can leverage text messages? Because I don't know. I myself is like I'm a little confused about what the best text messages are because I've seen spam obviously, and then there's one person like I texted one person. It was an influencer for a client of ours, and so I was texting with them, but then I got on their SMS list. So like and he has some interesting content every once in a while. I don't even know if it's oh, I'm sure it's planned, but like every once in a while it's like a gardening tip, so I'll get like a gardening tip. So like what do you think? I mean, I think you can really damage a relationship with SMS.
Mhm.
How do you nurture an SMS? That seems like so personal, intimate.
Yeah, I think it's generational as well.
Right.
You and I, perhaps
Right.
text messaging was really new when we were much, much younger.
Yeah.
It's a different ball game now. I guess we we would always look. We talk about these multiple channels, but we're looking at it in terms of giving the user choice. So we're not bringing one genie into an email list and forcing her to be on SMS and forcing her to be in a group. But we're presenting the options, and whatever works best for Genie is what we're gonna do. So that if she wants to give us her phone number so we can text her on launch day, then great, give us a phone number. But if she doesn't want it, that's fine too. We're gonna work to try and identify and build whatever relationship you want with us. Maybe you spend a lot of time on Facebook. Maybe you spend a lot of time. Maybe you do spend time in your inbox.
Right.
Maybe uh,
So it's just another option basically.
another option, yeah. And I don't know if I can speak too much to nurturing because we don't use it for that capacity. We use it purely as a touch point. So
Okay.
when we launch, we need to know people know, and that's a way of making sure that people know. But we're not going to be sending multiple text messages because I too, like you, I find that a bit invasive. So we try to avoid it and just use it for the most important messages.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense. Like if you're launching, even if you're a company who gets text message, subscribers and says, hey, yes, opt me in whenever you launch a new product. So then you just do that one text. It's not like an ongoing conversation.
Right, and it works. Sure, some people might not like having a couple of messages, but firstly, they've signed up for it in the first place. You've given
Right.
them that option,
They opted in. Yeah.
and just the response rate is astronomical compared to things like email marketing. The open rates, the click rates, it's just astronomical. So in the case of making sure everyone who's interested in what you've got to offer is aware that you're now live and launched and it's available, there's just nothing beats it at the moment.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think you have to be very crafty with it though.
Yeah.
So okay, so we've talked about a lot of different things. I have so many questions just for me. But how do you think you can leverage the work that we do in PR with media? How can you leverage that to kind of supplement what you do in digital marketing when you're launching a new product?
Yeah, probably a couple of things come to mind, and I'll turn this back on you as well from your perspective. But I think the first is just alignment and communication and learning. When we're working together, or we're working with an PR agency, or you're working with a digital advertising company, they're learning lots of different things, and you're learning lots of different things, and making sure you communicate that is so important because we're going to be learning things that are super useful for you, and vice versa. So
Mhm.
just making sure that there's a communication going on there, and lessons are being passed between each other. And the second thing I think is timing. Especially with launch campaigns, we have these periods of traction, right? From digital especially.
Mhm.
And that means there's also periods of low traction. So looking at things with PR, for example, PR has the opportunity to, in some ways, be timed in a way that's more meaningful. So if ads and email have given you a big launch success early on, you've had a lot of people come in and people are buying your product, and then things quiet down a bit. That's where something like PR can come in and, from a timing perspective, help give a launch and the campaign specific boosts at specific times.
Right.
So ads and PR can lean on each other, I suppose, because they're not all going to do fantastic all the time. So,
Yeah.
but how do you? I mean, when we work together, what is it you look for from us? What do you find useful from us to make sure your PR work is as best as it could be?
That's an excellent question. Yeah, I think for us, it's really good for us to understand which demographic is responding the most, because then we will focus on those media outlets that address those demographics. And we obviously, when a launch is happening, we focus on online primarily, but the secondary one is obviously like print and broadcast and other avenues. But yeah, I think from you, we really like to hear back on which angles are resonating with the markets, because then we could pitch those same angles to the media, and if they resonate, I agree, like when the media writes something, what we've done in the past with digital marketing is like, oh hey, we expect, Yahoo News to be posting this article, we can lower digital ad spend for a couple days and then pump it back up after that, and maybe leverage pieces of that article for advertising, like the angle that they took. So we're really looking at messaging and which messages are like, resonating with people.
To piggyback on that, you mentioned using that PR in your messaging. That's something important. That's something we can't do until a campaign is live and launch has
Right.
happened. But it's a really useful way of getting third party credibility. One of the biggest challenges for anyone launching something, especially if it's their first thing, is
Mm-hmm.
they don't have credibility. And but if we can get these PR messages, something featured by Mashable or Business Insider or Forbes or Yahoo or whatever it is, and we can sprinkle that into our advertising, that third party credibility goes a long, long way. To
Yeah,
help,
like as seen in, whatever.
yeah, or nice quotes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay. So, I mean, we're skipping over a lot of questions here. And hopefully, if you guys have any questions and you're watching or listening to this, we are posting this on YouTube if you want to watch. But also, if you have any questions, just shoot me an email and I'll make sure to connect with Will to get the answer for you. But what kind of ads are we looking, I mean, ad budgets are we looking at? So we're getting into product launches. Maybe I'm a brand new product, a brand that's never launched anything before. Obviously there's like that validation phase, and then there's the launch phase. But what kind of budgets are we looking at to get started if I'm launching something like a gadget or a product that needs to be in someone's hands? I'm sure it kind of differs, but what's a healthy ad budget to start with?
I would say a healthy ad a healthy ad budget does depend on what you want to achieve. But as a rule of thumb, I think keeping in mind that if you're launching something, you should expect to spend about 15 to 20% of the revenue you're trying to bring in on your ad budget. I think that's reasonable. So
Okay.
if you want to raise $50,000 in a month, you should be expecting to spend a good $10,000 on your digital advertising. Over time, that number can go down. Those dollars you bring in early on, those are going to be the most valuable dollars you ever spend in your advertising budget. And so you should expect to spend a little more per customer than you might want to in the long run. But over time, you build that traction, build that credibility. This 20% number may go down to 15%, may go down to 10%. But as a rule of thumb, across any sort of budgets and any sort of revenue figures, I think that 20% number is a good one to keep in mind.
Yeah. That's a good conservative estimate, I think.
Okay, 20 to 30.
So are you okay? So now we're in pandemic. This is like going on forever. It feels like it. I'm sure we'll get out of it at some point. But what are the like? I mean, everyone's online. I think we've got a lot of fatigue. We've got a lot of it kind of fluctuates, right? Like you get really tired and then you get back on, and then you kind of do this like weird phased approach now with the internet and your phone and everything. Are you seeing any particular trends on Facebook advertising or email marketing like that would affect some kind of launches, or things that people should consider when they're creating this like strategic plan? What kind of trends are you seeing right now in digital marketing?
Well, the pandemic's been very fruitful for e-commerce, and
Yeah.
we've seen more people launching and more people spending money online than ever before. So I think the digital advertising industry has been probably the least affected. We certainly haven't felt the bad effects that a lot have felt. Trends wise, I mean, maybe the pandemic accelerated the competitiveness and more people are spending more money online. More people being brands and marketing companies are spending more money online than ever before, and that just makes life harder for everyone. There's
Yeah.
more competition, there's more changes, there's more privacy concerns you hear about all the time. So if anything, it's just made everything a little bit harder. But that's a natural evolution of these platforms, I think, and maybe the pandemic just sped it up. I think when I'm looking at trends or thinking about trends, the most important thing is, well, I'm always thinking about how to diversify because Facebook in the last couple of years has taken a bit of heat, and as is the lifespan of any big company, it's probably not going to last forever. And so, what is the next Facebook advertising platform? What is the next Google advertising platform? And how can we make sure that these trends and these ups and downs don't have a big effect on what we do? How can we
Right.
diversify what we do and the platforms we use to avoid being at risk of these fluctuations and constant changes? And there is an answer to that. Facebook is still the best by a long way in the advertising platform.
Mhm.
Uh, so we're hoping that others come up. TikTok, we're trying out a bit more these days than we used to. There's a few other options out there that we're testing, but hopefully just diversifying and finding as they come in these new opportunities, these new platforms, because they'll be the cheapest ones to use. And generally, the biggest hurdle is just how expensive these platforms get because of how competitive they get. So the
Yeah.
more we can find anything that's a lower cost of advertising, a lower cost of reach, it's going to be huge for us and anyone launching products like this.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's like everything's getting more expensive. So it does it put the competitive edge is much higher.
I mean,
So
PR wise, I imagine things have changed more than for digital ads. Like obviously events haven't been happening for a year
yeah,
and
no events.
accommodation.
And similarly, like the competitive edge has been sped up. So when we're talking to media, we're competing against twice as many products that are dying to get this media coverage, right? So it's very hard. But the one thing about PR or new product launches is I did find, I mean, right now we've kind of resumed kind of, I think, back to normal almost. But I would say, a big part of 2020, a lot of production just slowed down, right? So there wasn't a lot of new products that were coming soon. There wasn't a lot of, for us, a lot of big product launches until I would say October or September, October, when people felt more comfortable in launching stuff. So there was a little bit of a window between like March and August, or yeah, between March and August, where everything kind of slowed down. But people were concerned with their online presence, so that was different. It was a different kind of PR that we were working on. It wasn't necessarily product marketing, but just awareness, brand awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting and tricky. I find it a little daunting too. Because I don't know all the nooks and crannies of online, and we're missing a lot of the physical stuff, events, print, magazines, things like that, where you really have to stand out, and not everybody's willing to take a risk to stand out too. So that's another thing. So if the more risky you are, I feel like the better chance you have to stand out. But that doesn't mean you don't have a chance if you're a conservative. You know,
Yeah,
it's just you're playing with all the other competitors that you have in that pool.
yeah, I agree.
So, is there any like couple of tips? We always like to kind of leave off with some hacks or tips or something that people can apply to their product launch strategy or whatever we're talking about. Any tips that either people you've seen do terribly wrong or things that just might like give them a light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, I mean, I would say going back again to validate, 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 validate. Don't spend a lot of time and money and energy without this proof of concept. Uh, that's just so important. And I would also, I think one of the things we tend to see is because there's so much out there on digital marketing and digital advertising, there's so much great information and courses and whatnot that people want to do it themselves, and I understand that it's not brain surgery. People can do it themselves. They can learn it and they can implement good stuff. There's great training out there to do that. But in the context of launches, you're playing with fire a little bit in taking the little time you do have to try and learn. There's a reason there are experts out there, and there's a reason they're the best at what they do because they have. We talked earlier about being able to predict, and that's really important. So I think I say it penny wise and pound foolish. That saying is, don't be cautious of trying to cut your costs too much early on because this is the launch. This is you can't do this again. You can, but you can't like rewind time and do this particular launch again.
Right.
You need to have the best people around you, and you can't do everything yourself. So if ever there's a time to invest in improving your concept and validating your idea, just give yourself that opportunity. Put the investment in, bring on the right people, bring on the right people around you, whether it's advertising or customer service or PR or photography. Really give yourself the best shot because this is your one chance at launching this thing that you've been planning to launch probably for a long time. I would say that's a big one. Don't be penny wise and pound foolish. And second thing I would just make sure people are aware of is just understanding what's going on,
Mm.
whether it's data or uh, kind of what's happening below the iceberg, below the water. There's a lot of these. You see the revenue, you see the money, you see the sales, but what goes on understanding behind that and tracking that and making sure everything's set up to give you the best learning possible. It's terrible when someone spends thousands of dollars on a campaign and they might have the customers, yes, they have some customers, but they don't have any data or learning or understanding. The question of, well, what works? They don't
Right.
really know these things. And so just making sure at the start, you're planning and preparing to set up this launch in a way where you'll be able to learn from it. And this is the start of your long-term marketing strategy and efforts. And making
Right.
sure you're preparing in the right way to set up that foundation is really important. And people often skip ahead and they want to get the sales, but that pre-work is so important.
Yeah, that's great advice. I agree with you 100%. So and I've done it. I've personally been like, oh, being in PR, I'm like, yes, I could do this. And once I start doing it, I regret it immediately. I'm like, I need someone else who could do this better because yes, while you can always do something, it's just if you don't know the nuances, it's just so difficult. Like I digital marketing, especially with Facebook, right? Everything changes so quickly all the time.
Yeah, and that's another point I had in my mind was reinventing the wheel. If they're working with people who have done this 100 times, 1,000 times,
Yeah,
then you're learning from all that experience. If you're doing it yourself for the first time, you are reinventing this entire thing yourself for your launch, and that's fine. But you don't tend to have the time to be able to do that, and so making sure you're using the time you have in the most efficient way is super important.
yeah. No, this is very true. Thank you so much. I think this was great. I think it is some good nuggets. So hopefully, everyone listened well. But again, if you have any questions that we did not answer, please email me, ranjini at thesilvertelegram.com. And Will, where can people find you and Russell Marketing?
Yeah, so website URL is russellmarketing.co, or you can contact me, will at russellmarketing.co as well. If you have any questions for me or want to check us out.
Yeah, I will put all his information in the show notes like we always do. And thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a good conversation, and I'll probably see you sometime this week.
All right, thank you, Randy.
All right, thanks.